All right. Welcome to Zelda Dungeon Runners. My name is Kay Grovile. We are joined today by the one and the only Joash, the man, the myth, the legend himself. And yeah, let's get right into it. Just tell us about yourself, Joash, for those unanointed viewers who do not know who you are. Just give us a little summary on who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Joaish. I have been streaming slash speedrunning for about 6 years. On my channel lately, we do a lot of speedruns. We do some randomizers and some casual games. And I even do some game dev as well. But yeah, I've been speedrunning for about 6 years, and I mainly speedrun Wind Waker HD, Majora's Mask 3D, and more recently, I've been speedrunning Echoes of Wisdom.
Mhm. Awesome. So tell us kind of about your speedrunning journey. So what got you into running in the first place? And yeah, I guess you already said you've been doing it for about 6 years. So
Yeah, so I feel like for many years throughout my life, I've always had like an interest in speedrunning. Like throughout the years, I'd always like occasionally watch some that thought might be interesting to me, here and there. And I thought in some points in my life, I thought, okay, maybe I'll give this like a try someday. I never like really knew when, how, what game, and sometimes ones that interested me were it was like inconvenient to run or whatnot. But what really got me into speedrunning, what actually got me started, was when Wind Waker HD found barrier skip back in the year 2017, and I was watching a lot of runs of that, especially watching Gymnast a lot, watching him do runs with barrier skip. And I remember when he did that big reveal of Morth Hover. That was like the day I was like, okay, I'm gonna learn this, and we're gonna see how it goes. And then really the rest is history from there, because I started running. And then when I started doing full runs, because I actually was doing some speed runs for like a few months of Wind Waker HD, like before I even streamed. I was just kind of doing it for fun, not even recording, just kind of doing it. And then in about August, I was like, okay, I guess I'll go get a capture card and just record runs, and rest is history on that one. As far as like starting speed running.
Mhm. So you said that's when you started. Were how when you said that you were kind of following speedrunning before, like what were you watching that like kind of since you were a kid, or do you remember like what your first speedrun was that you watched, or
I remember. I think I remember specifically that the first speedrun I ever watched was Super Mario 64 16 star, which at the time I didn't know it was 16 star. I just knew Super Mario 64 speedrun. And I remember watching it, thinking it was really cool. And seeing all this fast movement and being like, "Whoa, that's crazy!" And then seeing the BLJ happen at the very end, it's just like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" And I'm like, are they cheating? Like, what's going on? And then, I looked into it a little bit more. It's like, oh, okay, so this is stuff you can actually like do in the game. That's cool. And I started watching more. I think this had to have been when I was like a kid. This was like back in 2008, maybe, I think. And like I was looking into other games as well. I was watching like Ocarina of Time. I remember the first Ocarina of Time run I watched. It's a route it was a route that was very similar to what is now known as, I think, uh, glitchless 80% now, where it's like you do the Deku Tree, you go to then you go as child into Gerudo Valley, and you break into you break past the gate, and then go all the way to Spirit Temple early on, and then you do the rest of the child dungeons after that, and then come back as adult, and you're able to just go straight to Spirit Temple later on. I remember that was my first Ocarina of Time run I ever watched, and like ever since then, I didn't watch any like streamers, or like I didn't even really watch it regularly. It was just kind of every now and then I'd think about it and be like, okay, let's see what this one's like. I always kind of it was always kind of like here and there whenever I watched it, and I kind of got more and more interested in later years, and especially now when I got closer and closer to the time that I would actually start doing it myself. And so it was always kind of there. And I think I even was like, because I mentioned I watched Gymnast a lot. early on in the Wind Waker side of things. I think I'd also seen some of his like really old Majora's Mask 3D runs as well, and that's kind of how I knew who he was. Like I saw his channel, I was like, oh yeah, I think I've seen this guy before. I watched him, and so yeah, it kind of ended up like that in terms of how I kind of got introduced to speedrunning. It just kind of happened that way, starting with that very first Super Mario 64 16 star. And actually, I think even as a kid, I like tried it a few times. I mean, obviously not recorded, but I like tried to do like some of the tricks and maybe even like a few runs, like way back then.
Fair enough. uh, I have not ever actually finished Mario 64. I know, big shocker, but maybe one
Oh
day I
man.
will. And if I ever do, it will probably be learning the 16 star route because um,
Yeah,
I've
honestly,
just
yeah,
I've just
honestly, that's
seen that
fair.
everywhere, and um, I feel like at this point it'd
Well,
be
with
easier than trying to do the full game.
oh, definitely. No, 16 store for SM64 is definitely the easiest thing to learn and get into. So yeah, that's definitely a good idea if you ever do that for
Fair enough.
sure.
But yeah, moving past Mario, it seems like you kind of settled into Zelda as your main series. And so, what about the Zelda series keeps bringing you back to it as opposed to other games? And have you run any other games other than Zelda? I know you just talked about Mario a little bit, but yeah, tell us about that.
Ooh, excuse me.
Tease you.
Yeah, so um yeah, so Zelda has always been my favorite series for pretty much my entire life, or as long as I can remember. Um that's probably like that's probably like biggest reason for sure. Uh Going a little deeper into that, Zelda series has always kept me coming back because I've always loved as far as the speed run side of things, I've always loved the runs and how interesting they are and how intricate things are and the many different types of varieties of glitches you can see throughout the entire series. Like it's always fascinated me that this long running series just has a whole span of just different sequence breaks and glitches you can properly execute in there, and there's so much intricacy into it. So that's one thing that's always kept me coming back to the Zelda series. It's also just a series I'm really comfortable with, and one I'm just very familiar with, and just love doing, like more than pretty much any game there is really. That's always kind of kept me coming back. Always kind of know what to look for in Zelda games, I guess. And then as far as other games other than Zelda, we did mention Mario 64 as well. I did end up doing some Super Mario 64 few years ago. I still come back to it every now and then. That one kind of is more maybe a little bit more casual. I definitely don't feel like I'm as strong on the Mario side as I am on the Zelda side for sure. But I did do 16 star and I did some 70 star, and I might eventually learn 120 star fairly soon. I've thought about doing that fairly recently, but I've done a decent bit of SM64. I've done some Super Mario Sunshine. Not too much of it though. That's definitely something I would like to revisit someday. Maybe far down the future. Let's think. Was there any other game that I did speedruns of that weren't Zelda? I think that was about it. I mean, I've mainly done Zelda's speedruns. I almost did speedruns of Hollow Knight. That didn't end up happening. Maybe that'll happen someday in the future. But that was something I was looking into at one point. But yeah, mostly Zelda. But as far as like outside Zelda, like Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, I don't think there is any other ones other than that I can remember.
Fair enough. You speedrun, so getting into Zelda, you speedrun both Majora's Mask and Wind Waker. And unlike a lot of people, you focused on the remakes of both those games, so MM3D and Wind Waker HD. And so a lot of people don't necessarily know, how much difference is there between the remakes and the original. So tell us a little bit about why you chose those versions of the game as opposed to the original when it comes to speedrunning.
Yeah, so I feel like it's more or less two very different stories for each of those games. For Wind Waker, it was the main two reasons was one, it was the one I was following at the time. It had like barrier skip, and again, like going back to when when I was talking about when I first got into speedrunning, Wind Waker was it was easier to get into because it also had like barrier skip and it just got more cover. So it was a really short run that the 80% was going to be like an hour long. So it's like, okay, that's reasonable. I'm like somewhat busy. I'm like somewhat busy at the moment. So I'm like I can maybe easily get into this with it being like just a 1 hour run. Like this doesn't seem too bad to get into. It's not long. It's like kind of the right length. And the other reason I guess kind of going along with that point was that I already had the game. I could just switch my Wii U to the Spanish, which is the second fastest language in the game. So I could easily just take my Wii U and the game and just go ahead and start it. Like I already had the game, so it was like, okay, all I have to do is just try it. And that was that. And it was also really convenient too because because I was watching Wind Waker HD a lot, it made me want to replay the game again. So I replayed the game and even 100% completed it again, and also got all the figurines. And even after all that, I was like, wow, I want to keep playing. Like even after all that, I was like, I still want to keep playing. And little did I know when I thought that I would be still playing it 6 years later. um, so I guess maybe be careful what you asked for, but I mean it's been fun all the way through. Yeah, that's kind of why I started with the remake. I stuck with the remake because I always like I don't know the HD remaster always felt more comfortable to me in my opinion. I was also liked the HD version a lot more. Um, and again, I guess it's also good to mention that back when I initially was learning, barrier skip was on the HD version, but not on the GameCube version yet. So the HD version was just kind of the one to go to at that time as well. It's like it's very different today because now they both have barrier skip, and now as of recently, the GameCube version is faster than the HD version, which is still crazy to me. But yeah, that's kind of my that was kind of my thought process with the Wind Waker HD. Majora's Mask 3D is kind of a different story, whereas with Wind Waker HD, it was a part of my reason was that it was very convenient for me to run because I already had it. With MM3D, on the other hand, yes, I did have the game, but I didn't have a capture card for it, so there was an inconvenience to that. But the thing was, is that once again, going back to going back to watching Gymnast, I saw him doing MM3D runs, and I remember seeing him do really old runs of MM3D, and then he was doing it again at around that time when I got into the game. But what really spoke to me about the 3D version is that it was just so unique and so different from the original. And I don't know, there was like similarities to it between it and Wind Waker HD. It had like a fast movement, kind of like Wind Waker HD did with like Goron. It had Goron Mistling in there. It had all these unique tricks. It was a unique run, and it felt a lot easier to get into that run as opposed to the original. The only thing was I just had to pay a lot of money, being like $500 to to buy a capture card, which at the time I was fortunate enough to be able to afford it. So I ended up getting the capture card, and then a few weeks later I got it, and then I ended up just getting into the run, and the rest is history on that one. And even like to this day, like I've even done some speed runs of the original, and I would say as a speed run, I prefer 3D because 3D is a very underrated speed run, but partly because it's on 3DS and you have the whole capture issue and all that. But I definitely feel like it's very underrated. It's got so many like cool tricks to it. It's just I feel like it's kind of more 3D is more my style when it comes to the speed run as opposed to the original, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And continuing on from that, you've touched on the capture card a bit. One of the main reasons that MM3D is not particularly popular in the speedrun community is obviously because it's harder to capture, and just generally playing on a handheld system is a lot harder to do for longer periods of time than if you had your full screen and your proper controller, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I guess if you want to touch on that aspect a bit, and tell anyone who is considering maybe getting a capture card or trying that run, like, what would you say to them?
Yeah, so at least for me personally, like yeah, it is a little weird to speedrun for long periods of time on a 3DS. Um, and I'll actually touch up on the controller thing maybe a little bit later as well. But to me, I kind of got used to it. It didn't playing on a 3DS didn't really bother me all that much. In fact, playing the game on a 3DS was actually convenient in the sense that I could take the game with me and practice it wherever. Like I could just take the 3DS with me and just practice it anywhere I want. So like even if I'm on a trip or whatever and I was like actively running the game, I could just practice the game right then and there, because I can just take the game with me. But yeah, like the biggest inconvenience is the capture card situation, which I've had a bit of a journey with with the capture cards. Probably more so than most people. So I'm definitely not. I feel like I'm probably not the majority when it comes to this kind of journey. Um, but my first capture card, it lasted me for about a year, maybe almost 2 years. But then it started to like disconnect a lot, and I had issues with that. And then my dad helped me solder in the wires that apparently had come loose with the capture card, and then that lasted me for a little while. Although during that little period after that 3DS surgery, if you will, I had to be very careful not to bump the cord, because if I bumped the cord ever so lightly, then it would like disconnect for a little bit. So yeah, be very careful not to tap that little cord. Um, but then it ended up just not working at all after a while. So then later on, like maybe year or so later, I ended up getting another 3DS, which yes was another $500 to just get a new capture card, and that one has lasted me pretty well. More recently, it's given me some like visual glitches on the capture cards. I haven't been using it as much. I still haven't really figured out how I'm gonna fix that aspect of it. So I've had issues with both capture cards I've had. Now that being said, plenty of people have had capture cards that have lasted them for years. I've probably been insanely unlucky
Mm-hmm.
with them. But more recently, I did do some marathon runs with on MM3D. I was doing like some MM3D runs, so I thought, okay, if I had this like really glitchy looking footage, I'm doing the marathon, and if I wanted to do some runs, maybe I can try to find an alternative. Because like in the back of my head, I'm also thinking, okay, what could be some like much cheaper alternatives to help people get into this game more?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a fairly goofy setup where I had one of those like desk. I don't know if I have it with me right now, but I had like one of those desk things that you can like hook up to your phone. It's like one of those like bendable, extended phone holders that you can hook up to your desk. And normally you just use it to scroll through your phone with it like right there. I instead had it to where I hooked it up like this, made it to where I can have my phone looking down at my 3DS, and that is how I was able to capture footage. Which I was like, okay, this is really goofy and probably doesn't look as good as a capture card. Which I mean, they're two very different looks. But I have been told by like one or two people they actually liked that look more. So like, what I ended up doing with it was, since I did already have a capture card, I had that set up. Then I had like the game feed in a smaller window, just so you can see the glitchy footage, or at least have a consistent look on that. And then I still use the capture card for audio, which I think you could probably get audio with like an audio jack if you didn't have a capture card. So I guess based on my experience with that, you could essentially do what I do there to maybe like get into 3DS speedrunning if you like, and then if you want more of that capture card field, and then that's an investment that you can look into. My biggest recommendation for all people that look into getting capture cards is I wrapped I put like little holders on the back of my 3DS, and I wrapped the cord around so that it wasn't like bending too much or moving around too much whenever I was playing on the 3DS, which I think that actually helped the longevity of both my 3DSs a lot, especially after the first one broke. I started doing that after the surgery of the first one, and I think it helped it a lot to just keep it still and gave it less injury.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's my long that's my longer than I thought story of 3DS capture cards.
I know it's great. um, and moving on to more recent speedruns of yours, with the release of Echoes of Wisdom, you've been grinding some all dungeons. And
Mhm.
tell us about your experience with that, and how that differs, like running a game that just came out where they're constantly finding new stuff versus, you know, starting to run a game that's already been a bunch of years old, because this might be kind of, you know, one of your first experiences with that. So yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I might end up making this also a bit of a longer story than expected, but um technically I would probably say this might be my second experience with getting into a brand new game's speed run. Um the first time I actually did try to do some speedruns of the Link's Awakening remake when that came out.
All
I
right.
didn't really last too long with that. Mainly because for that game, there were so many like new discoveries happening like almost every single day. The route was constantly changing every time. So it was so hard to keep up. And I was just like, okay, this is really hard to keep up. And then like later on the down the road I tried to get into it, but like the 80% ended up being like super difficult. But with Echoes of Wisdom, I kind of went into it with a different mindset, because I finished the game. I really enjoyed the game, and I had heard that there were wrong warps in the game, and so I was like, okay. So after I beat the game, I was like, okay, I'll look into the speed run, and I'll go into this knowing that I might only do this for like a week, because I've had a bad habit like before where I'll say I'll speed run a game and have genuine interest in it because I think it looks cool, and then I don't end up doing it as long, and I end up going back to games I already run. But for this one, I was like, okay, I'll just see this and maybe just mess around with it, just see what happens, look into it. And so I looked into 80%, and 80% didn't really look that appealing. But then I watched the old Dungeons run. I was like, okay, this actually looks really cool. Yeah, because like for those that don't know, the Echoes of Wisdom speed run, 80% like goes through an intro and then just essentially does a warp that it does a setup for a warp that's like fairly difficult to do, and it takes a while to set up, and then it's also RNG on top of that, and then they after that they do an easier warp to the final boss. But all dungeons was like far more interesting to me looking into it, and it was like a bunch of wrong words like into the dungeons and skips a lot of the cutscenes and gets to more of the but more like interesting gameplay. So I was like, okay, and it was like a little over 2 hours at the time. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll try this out. Just kind of go through the route, see how I feel about it. Which it was kind of easy to get into. Some of the strats weren't really that hard. So I was like, okay, I'll look into this. Lo and behold, about 2 months later, I'm still running Echoes Wisdom All Dungeons. I ended up really enjoying it, and this is one of those times where I said, I'm interested in a speed run," and then I actually like really got into it. Now, as far as my experience with it as a new game, I already mentioned kind of how I felt during the Link's Awakening era. I mean, I didn't really last long on that one. I will say maybe it's the circumstances, and maybe I just got lucky. Um, But the developments for this game didn't feel like they went like nearly as fast. Like the category has definitely evolved a decent bit since I started running for sure, but it felt like more smaller changes here and there, like maybe adjusting some strats here, maybe we have some better ideas here, maybe like a slight route adjustment here. Like I don't know, like things like that. Especially, I feel like it felt like the discoveries were kind of progressed a bit. They were a bit easier to follow this time around, which I think helped a lot. And so like overall, the experience has been really nice. So I would definitely say that now Echoes of Wisdom is probably like among my main games, I guess, if you will. It might be up there with Wind Waker HD and MM3D. And I guess one last thing I'll say about that, say about the game in general. I mentioned that we were talking about controllers and how a 3DS feels to speedrun. I will say, given that I speedrun Wind Waker HD, where I play on a gamepad and a Pro controller, because we have to use both controllers. Which, not saying the gamepad's bad. I love the gamepad, but it's very unconventional controllers, and then the 3DS is also unconventional. I will admit, it did feel nice to be able to play and speedrun a game on a normal controller and nothing else. I don't know. It just it felt nice. It feels nice in a way. It's like a fresh fresh change of pace.
Breath of fresh air.
Breath of fresh air, yeah.
Exactly. Fair enough. And so having said all of that, if you had to pick one favorite speed game and beyond that, one favorite speed category, which doesn't necessarily have to be the same game overall if you speedrun multiple categories, what would you say is your favorite game and favorite category, speedrunning wise?
Hmm. This might be kind of a difficult one for me to answer. I like there are like a group of categories I feel like are like in like my top favorites. I might though say that I'll word it like this. My favorite speedrun of all probably will have to be Wind Waker HD 80% without Puppet Gain and Skip. Any route that does not do Puppet Gain and Skip,
Hmm.
I would say is probably my favorite. It's a nice length. It's got a lot to it. Movement's fun. And I don't know, maybe I'm also biased. It has a special place in my heart. It's what I started out with. It's what I've ran for a long, long time. I'm very familiar with it. It's gone through like 3 or 4 different really interesting routes. I would probably say like overall that might be my favorite one. Even if I haven't really been running it or I haven't ran it in a while, that might be like my overall favorite one for sure. I guess maybe if we're talking, if I were to give like maybe a very close second, it would be Majora's Mask 3D, all masks. I love that category. It's so good.
Fair enough. Um, so moving more into the casual side of things, what would you say is your favorite game out of the games that you don't speedrun? And tell us maybe some of the reasons why you chose not to speedrun it. Because for a lot of
Hmm.
people, maybe they don't want to speedrun their actual favorite game of all time. They don't want to ruin it, or maybe that's not your experience. Maybe your actual favorite game is one you speedrun. But I don't know. Is there any games that you really like that you just do not run and don't think you will ever run?
That's an interesting one. I can take this from a number of different approaches. I guess first of all, I will say that recently I've actually like been trying to figure out like what my favorite games are, like my top five. I've been kind of like trying to figure out what really is my favorite games like of all time. Like even among like my favorite Zelda games and even like non-Zelda games, which I almost kind of group in which I almost kind of put in different groups because like Zelda's always going to be like up there like in general. Um, I I almost wanted to say Majora's Mask, like the 64 version, because that is one of my favorite games. Um, and I just prefer the 3D version for speedrunning, but I way prefer the 64 version casually. I guess maybe to make this answer a little bit more interesting, um, because well, I can also say one of my favorite games is Wind Waker, but obviously I speedrun that one, so that didn't count. But okay, I guess I'll go to maybe a more recent game that I've played that has now become one of my favorites. Um, that I don't speedrun, but maybe it's also not fair because I also maybe recently played it, but I probably am not going to speedrun it. But Outer Wilds is probably one of my new favorite games of all time. And not that I would never speedrun it, but I don't know. I've already got a lot of plans with like other Zelda stuff. The speedrun is really interesting with it, but the experience with that game, I think I could definitely take my experience I already had with that game and treasure it a lot. And I've already gotten everything I could have ever wanted out of that game for sure. So I'd probably say that. Maybe I'll make the answer a bit more interesting.
Hmm.
I'd probably say Outer Wilds is probably one of my favorite games of all time that I don't speedrun.
It's really interesting that you say that. I feel like I need to try this Outer Wilds now because I think I asked Gymnast the same question a few months ago and he gave
Yes.
the exact same
Yes.
answer,
Yes.
which is surprising to me,
Yes, you did.
because I think like a year or two before that, he had said it was a completely different game. He was saying like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon was one of his favorite games, which is also one of my favorite games, if you know what I base my channel off of. But yeah,
Oh
both
yeah.
having you and Jim both saying that's one of your favorite games of all time is kind of got me thinking maybe maybe I need to add that to my list. So um,
To put it into perspective, I played the game like this year. Well, okay, I started it last year and then I got really busy, but then I restarted it this year. Like to put it into perspective, I mean, this was a game I played this year and I'm saying it's like one of the best games I've ever played.
mhm,
And the thing I will recommend if you do end up playing it, go into it as blind as possible. If you go into it knowing less and less about it, you'll have a better experience. Like the experience is the experience.
mhm. And I mean, I think that's the case with majority of games nowadays. It's just really hard with the internet. I mean, back in the day, you'd play a
Oh
game
yeah,
as a kid and you wouldn't, you wouldn't be able to look up walkthroughs and speedruns and stuff right now. And nowadays it's kind of sad if you don't play a game right when it comes out, you're going to get spoiled somewhere. Stuff's flying
yeah, for
around. So
sure.
um
Yeah, people are pretty good about not spoiling that game just because it's an integral part of the game,
mhm,
being able to go into it blind. So it is really cool that people are like kind of unanimously like that for that game. So
mhm, fair enough. And on that, I was kind of mentioning Gymnast. You've mentioned Gymnast a couple of times. He's obviously one of your influences for speedrunning. Do you have any other people that kind of influenced you and kind of inspired you to get into speedrunning in the first place? Anyone that kind of, helped mentor you and teach you stuff? Anything like that?
I would say maybe to list off a couple ones that I can think of right off the top of my head. Yeah, Gymnast is one of them, definitely to help me get into the speedrunning. Later on down the line, I would probably say Mr. Alberto 23. Alberto is probably, well, not probably, he is the best Wind Waker HD speedrunner there is. He taught me a lot about the game and just kind of taking inspiration from him and seeing how he practices and like studies how to get better at the game was definitely a big influence for me. And I would also say Z of G as well. And what I took from Z of G as far as like a speed run mentor is kind of is taking it from the approach of speed run what you want to speed run, and I feel like you'll enjoy it more if you just kind of speed run what you want to speed run what you want to play and don't feel like too pressured to do anything you feel too pressured to do, which I don't know, maybe that seems really weird. Maybe that seems really weird, um or maybe strange of a comparison, but like seeing him going and doing like randomizers for like a year or two, and then doing like one-off categories and like Tears of the Kingdom, and not necessarily like following the crowd, if you will, and doing like other categories in Ocarina of Time. Like recently, him doing like low percent all dungeons. Like to me that kind of mentality, even if it maybe is not exactly what he's going for, but like the mentality of doing the speedruns that you enjoy and really just playing the games to have fun really kind of changed my outlook at speedrunning like a couple of years ago, because there was a point where I was speedrunning ZC games, or Z Quest Classic games, which are essentially Zelda fan games based on the Zelda 1 engine. But I was speedrunning a couple of those games just because I thought I just thought it would be fun. Even though like some of those games I'd never even seen a speedrun, it was cool to, go in there and to route it out and to do the speedruns. And that kind of, I don't know, that whole thing kind of taught me, it just kind of seeing that, it kind of influenced me in that direction, to focus on speedrunning as like, okay, just have fun with it. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of what I got out of that.
Fair enough. um, so going on to your speedrun career, over the years, what would you say is the most challenging aspect for you?
Most challenging aspect of speedrunning. Really, like overall, I would say most challenging is just getting the time in there for it. But like really, like I guess maybe alongside that, uh practice, I would say, because I'm definitely one of those speedrunners where it's like I like doing runs more than practice. Now that does depend on the game, because Majora's Mask 3D I would say is almost the exception to that. Like I loved practicing that game. Like for some reason Majora's Mask 3D practicing like really hit home to me. But like I've even noticed like with Echoes of Wisdom as well. Like I have to just sit down and be like, okay, I need to practice some things. We need to lab out some things. We need to figure stuff out. But like once I sit down and start doing it, then I get a lot out of it. It's just kind of, I guess maybe that's one of the challenges, is just that discipline of just not being too lazy and being like, okay, because like I'll definitely have a habit of sitting down and being like, okay, I just want to relax. Let's just do some runs. Let's just see how it goes.
Hmm.
I guess maybe that'd be like one of the more challenging things I would say for me overall.
Fair enough. So yeah, so you mentioned a little bit earlier in your intro, that, and some people might not know, that you have dipped your feet into the video game development slash modding scene, as well as speedrunning. So tell us a little bit about that experience, and how has that affected your approach to streaming and how you approach speedrunning?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, like you mentioned, I've been into game dev, which I've been into game dev even like well before I started streaming as well. But I was kind of out of it for a while. But I more recently got back into it over the last couple of years, mainly through, like I said before, Z Quest Classic, which I'll call ZC, which is really what most of us call it anyway. So ZC. For those that don't know what ZC is a recreation of the original Zelda's engine. It's like fully like remade from the ground up. It was made like back in 2000, but it's had like so many enhancements and changes to it like over the years. Um and so you can make almost essentially like whatever you want out of it. But what intrigued me about it was that not only were people making like Zelda fan games out of it, which is what I initially got into it uh, before, like back in 2013, where it's like, oh, cool, I can make my own Zelda game. Very cool. But like what I use it more for now, and a number of other people use it for the same reason too, is using the assets of it to make original stories out of it. Just kind of more of a creative outlet, which is where you see I guess my two major games I've made on it, which is the Slipstream and the Deep, and then of course the game I've been working on more recently, Tranquil Expression. So yeah, like ZC has been definitely more of a creative outlet for me in more recent time, just kind of doing more original stories with it, original like more original gameplay ideas. But it's like the program is versatile enough to allow for that kind of thing. So it's like it's been really cool to do that, and it's been really cool recently to be able to do it on stream as well. Because like I mentioned, I do more often than not these days. I do more than just speedrunning as well. I also mentioned that I do game dev, and sometimes I do game dev on stream as well. Sometimes we listen to music. Sometimes we watch a past VOD, like a past playthrough of mine. And so it's always like pretty chill to just kind of work on stuff while streaming as well. Just kind of that multitasking for it. But it's been nice. It because like thinking about that like alongside streaming, it's like now I have like an extra audience for that kind of thing. So it's like it's really cool in that regard. And as far as speedrunning goes, of course, we have to address maybe the elephant in the room, a speedrunner and a game dev. How does that work? Because as we know, especially as Zelda speedrunners recently, you know, game developers will oftentimes patch out glitches in in the game, making you either have to down patch or deal with it. And you might ask me and wonder, well, what do you as a game dev, how do you see that kind of thing? I mean, personally, obviously, I would be a hypocrite if I were to patch out glitches that would benefit a speedrunner. I feel like that would be very hypocritical. But like aside from that, I mean, I honestly like I love seeing glitches and stuff in my game. Like Chef Bear had actually like done he did speed runs like a few years ago of Slipstream, which is the one of the games I made, and he actually ended up finding a bunch of different glitches and sequence breaks, and I honestly thought it was really cool. I was even helping him by like looking into the game and like answering questions that he had. I was literally helping him break my own game because I thought it was interesting, because like to me as a game dev, it's like, okay, I have a vision for the game and this is the game and this is how you play it normally. And like seeing it from the side of a speed run, it's like seeing the game in a whole new way. Because like to me, I always see games as like you see games in two different ways. It's like I see it casually and speed running, because it's like with the Majora's Mask thing. It's like if I look at Majora's Mask, I'm like, do I like which one do I like more casually? Well, casually I like 64, but speedrunning I like the 3DS version more. So it's like you see the game in like two different lights. So like to me, I love seeing it because it's like I can see two different sides of my game, and it's like Slipstream is a perfect example of this because Slipstream ended up being really broken as a speed run, um, without and without really being that broken casually, thankfully. To the point to where you can actually beat Slipstream in under a minute because you can escape the intro cutscene and walk to the end. It's really funny. But like I don't know, to me, because like to me also speedrunning makes the game last longer, because it's like if people are speedrunning your game, that means that people love your game and they want to learn more about it and they want to get more out of it. So like to me, it's like, okay, I almost like would consider it an honor to see like people running my games. That means they're enjoying it and they're like enjoying another aspect of it that is available for that game. It's like you're getting more out of it and it adds more to it to me. So that's kind of how I see it with like game dev and speedrunning. I hope that's kind of what you were looking for with that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said about um, people speedrunning your game means they enjoy it, because I think what I see a lot on the internet among people who are kind of against speedrunning is they talk about how they're breaking the game, and they're not doing it how the devs intended it, or they don't care about actually doing all the stuff in the game, and they just want to skip over it. And I think what you said is, I don't know, really good and educational, to be like, most people who speedrun a game have already beaten it probably multiple
Mhm.
times. They've probably, in a lot of cases, 100% of the game. And they're not doing it because they want to make fun and be like, oh, look, you messed up and you
You're
didn't you
right.
didn't patch this properly. It's usually because like, hey,
Right.
we want to play your game. So I really like that mindset, and I wish more developers had that mindset. I know there's a lot who
Oh,
do there, and there's
absolutely.
some who don't, but it's nice to
Absolutely.
have the option there. Um,
Shout outs to the Outer Wilds devs who actually sat on the couch for an AGDQ run of Outer Wilds 100%.
yeah, I think I've seen Terraria as well. They specifically
Oh, yeah.
they found some dupe glitches, and they're like, well, would a casual see this? Probably not. Let's just leave it in there.
Yeah. Exactly.
Leave fun
Exactly.
for both sides. Um,
Exactly.
Fair enough. So throughout your speedrunning career, moving back into the runs here, do you have a single run you can think of that is your proudest run, and not necessarily your fastest run as of now? It doesn't even have to be your current PB or world record, but a run that at the time you felt like, okay, this was the run. This felt really good.
Okay, so yesterday I was thinking a little bit about the interview, and I was thinking, okay, this might actually be one question that pops up, and it actually ended up being a question that popped up. So I actually did think about this question a bit yesterday, and the answer might be a little bit unexpected because I thought about a few runs that I could think of that I'm really really proud of. Like I thought about the 53 for Wind Waker HD before Paul Storage was found. I thought about when I got world record at 80%, the sub 50, maybe like the my all mass PB and how I routed that out. But the answer I'm actually going to give might be a little bit unexpected, but maybe not the sum. But the run I would say that maybe I'm the most proud of is the my 112.53, I think it was, in Wind Waker HD, 80% no MSS, which is now 80% restricted, but at the time it was no MSS. So yeah, so my Wind Waker HD 80% no MSS PB of 112 when I got 112. This was before pause storage was found. I was trying to get a 113. I had like a mid 114. And at the time, I really did not like no MSS. I just thought it was way less interesting to me compared to the doing MSS to skip the intro. And so it was just it was I just wasn't a fan of the category. I like it now. I like current no MSS though now, but at the time I was just kind of like, okay, I I really want to get this run over with. I want to get the 113 and move on. And then I just had a run that was just really good. Like it was like one of my best and well executed runs I've ever done. Like there were hardly any mistakes. I stayed probably like 10 to 20 seconds away from my sum of best, like going into the end game. Like I was so close to my sum of best, and I played like exceedingly close to my goals. It was a I would say it was probably a near flawless run, and it has a funny story to it too because like that run would have been world record if Alberto had not gotten a slightly faster time than that, like 30 minutes before. Like I think I even mentioned it during the run. I think it was like at the end of Outset. I mentioned I, I I saw that he got a 112 and I was like, okay, well I'm never catching up to that or something like that. Like during the run, and then I end up skipping 113 and getting a high 112, and I'm like, wow, well I'm never touching this again. Which I guess is kind of true because I've never touched that category without pause storage again, and probably never will. Um, but that run was just so it was so well executed that that's probably one of my best runs I've ever done as far as like execution. And it was also really funny because like near the end of the run, I was kind of playing it off as bad so I wouldn't get as nervous. And one of my viewers left I felt bad for him because he actually fell for it. He actually thought that I thought the run was bad, even though I was just kind of playing it off. And I was like, I wanted to tell him, but then at the same time, I was like, no, no, I gotta stay focused for the rest of this run. And then after the run, I'm like, okay, no, like this is actually a good run. I'm sorry, this is actually good. Uh, yeah, that that is the run I will say is probably my best run.
Fair enough. Um, so we've looked back a lot. It's time to look forward into your future. And I'm just wondering, do you have any specific future goals in speedrunning? Any records you're planning to break? And as far as your approach to speedrunning, do you have long term, like this is where I want to be with all these games, or is it kind of just one thing at a time and just rolling with the punches and seeing what happens?
See, a few years ago, I would have said I had like multiple goals to do this and this and this. I have multiple goals, which I guess is true to an extent today. But I have these days more so tried to stay focused on like one game at a time. Like right now, I would say my goal for Echoes of Wisdom All Dungeons is sub 150 and maybe getting world record back as well. I'm kind of taking I kind of take things as a step by step basis. I like these days I kind of like doing like smaller goals to maybe lead up to a potential big gold or a goal. But I guess as far as other runs that I have interest in and probably going to return to, I want to get sub two in Wind Waker HD all dungeons. Let's see, and maybe do like some other categories as well. Don't really have like very specific goals, but like the biggest goal I would like to do for Wind Waker HD is get sub two in all dungeons. Because I never ended up actually doing that. If I ever return, if I ever get back to MM3D at some point, I would like to get world record in No Wrong Warp and slash or all mass again. I could probably do that if I sat down and grinded it out. And I do, and like I said, I do want to maybe learn Mario 64 120 and maybe improve my other times in there a little bit. Nothing like too specific, just like maybe just general improvements. And maybe lastly, I do want to learn more Ocarina of Time categories in the future. Like I've thought about MST, all dungeons, restricted SRM, so like stuff like that. So like maybe not like exact goals, but like I have things I'm interested in and looking to get into, and maybe I'll have specific goals when I get there. But these days I've tried to stay like more centrally focused on one game so I don't get too distracted or like overwhelmed, I guess. So like the current goal right now is sub 150 in Echoes All Dungeons.
Mhm. Fair enough. And beyond that, do you see yourself continuing to? I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but do you see yourself continuing to be a speedrunner for the next 5, 10 years, and beyond? And outside of that, I know we talked about your game development as well, but do you have any other passions outside of gaming that we haven't discussed that you'd like to share? And where do you see yourself going, basically, with your life?
Well, I will definitely say that as long as life allows it, of course you never know how life will go. But I definitely plan to keep speedrunning for as long as I can, for sure. Like as long as life allows it, as long as I still am having fun with it, I can see myself doing this for a long, long time for sure. I'm definitely like planning on keeping it going for as long as possible. But yeah, game development. I also do like uh making, I guess like for a better term, well, filming. I do like filming as well. I do want to get back into maybe doing more filming, like making short movies or whatnot, because I did make that short movie for my 5 year anniversary of streaming um last year. Yeah, last year made that, and that was a lot of fun to do. That felt pretty good to be able to do and to get out there. Like I feel like those are kind of like those have those kind of three things have always been kind of my main passions these last few years, especially just the speedrunning slash streaming, game design and filming is I guess where I'm at with that right now.
Yeah,
Just creative work, really.
fair enough. And when you first started being a speedrunner and being a streamer, did you ever see yourself being where you are at this point?
No, absolutely not. No, I definitely did not. Because I started streaming just to record runs, and like I expected like maybe some people to come in there and like some people to come and chat here and there, but I also did not expect to be doing it for this long. Like back then, I didn't know how long I was going to be doing it, but I definitely didn't think it was going to be this long. Like I was not expecting when I first started doing those first few streams of just simply doing runs that I would be here with a community and not only doing speedrunning but like doing a bunch of other stuff. Like streaming has it's gone from that to pretty much being a like primarily Wind Waker HD speedrunner to just kind of doing a whole bunch of stuff really. Like streaming ultimately became it ultimately became my creative outlet. It allowed me to like revisit a lot of older passions I had and now do it in a way that's like really engaging with other people as well. Like it brought me back to game dev. I got the speedrunning in there. Got me back into doing short movies just for fun. Like it really brought back it brought back a lot of creative outlets for me. So, and I definitely was not expecting it to be that way, for sure.
And since you started speedrunning and streaming, how has the speedrunning scene changed kind of from your perspective, sorry, as far as like how technology has changed, how the community has changed, how public awareness of speedrunning has changed, and how do you see those changes continuing on to the future, the next few years of speedrunning?
Mhm. I definitely think speedrunning has changed a bit in the last 6 years that I've been a part of it. But maybe I definitely think perspective has changed a bit. When we had lockdown, it was definitely at an all-time high as far as like people doing it and people watching it. And of course, as things opened up again, there was less and less people maybe like watching or doing as many speedruns. Public outlook, I definitely think has changed a lot. I feel like there is like a general positivity towards it, even if you do have people that still look at it negatively. Like at least within like the last 6 years, we've seen like games like SM64 getting like live tournaments with like pace happening and whatnot. You're seeing more games like that getting live tournaments and you're seeing I guess maybe the marathon game evolving a lot because I think especially I think back when I started like really the main marathons were like GDQ ESA and they were just doing those the like two a year type of deal, but now you see like a whole lot more of that these days. And I guess another thing that's also changed a lot with speedrunning, and it was kind of a thing back when I started too, but it's especially more so now. Games these days, especially older games for sure, games these days have a lot more practice tools or better ways to practice as well.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really nice thing. I guess I can also mention that maybe people's perspective in what a speedrun should be like has changed a lot, maybe perhaps for better or for worse. Because I feel like maybe in the earlier days, people just they speedran for fun, and they speedran as is. But we definitely get a lot more discussions on like it's intro skips for certain games or allowing like certain things. I definitely think that dynamic has changed. People kind of see those things a lot differently these days, and it definitely is like a different approach to speedrunning that is definitely and that in and of itself I think has changed a lot in recent years as well. So I get my thoughts on this one are probably a bit more unorganized. So I think that's all I can really think of in regards to that. But yeah, I would say like it's definitely not between the last 6 years. This definitely hasn't been like a, massive, huge change as it was like maybe in the years preceding me being a speedrunner. But like
Mhm.
the scene has definitely changed a lot over the last few years for sure.
Yeah. And I guess for more you specifically, so obviously starting off, most speedrunners have a very small community, performing for an audience. And over the years, your community has grown quite a bit. And as that has grown, how have you changed your approach to streaming and speedrunning? Has your whole perspective and the way you act changed at all based on that?
I mean, I think the biggest change kind of goes back to what I was saying before about, having just having fun with it. Because like I would always have an approach of like, okay, I can't stream anything else, otherwise no one will watch. I have to, stay focused and stay like, competitive with like what people know me by with like so like sticking with Wind Waker HE, even if I really wanted a break from it at the time or something like that. But like a couple of years ago, maybe last year or somewhat like that. But like, or I guess maybe just over the years, I slowly started doing like more casual stuff and kind of a more variety of things like alongside speedrunning. Especially when I started doing more ZC stuff on stream and more casual stuff alongside that. Because there was a period where I wasn't speedrunning as much. Like it was like earlier this year slash a decent bit throughout last year, as well as just doing a lot more casual stuff. And I feel like I've probably gotten like really lucky and fortunate that people have come around and have just really enjoyed the stream and hanging out. We got some really cool people in the stream for sure. But like definitely that approach to just having more fun with what you're doing and enjoying what you're doing, I think helped make streaming less stressful for me and probably more enjoyable for other people as well. Because like if you're streaming something you're enjoying, then you're just kind of chilling. I mean, everyone's just chilling, having a good time. And I think doing that more variety and doing more ZC, especially like all that variety and casual and whatnot, I think definitely helped my channel grow a lot. Just to have that variety and to maybe loosen up about just having fun with streaming, just enjoying it.
Hmm. I think my next question you've probably answered mostly already throughout your other questions, unless you want to add anything more to it. I was just gonna say, like, what role does the speedrunning community as a whole kind of play in your journey? And you talked a little bit about some of your inspirations, and people coming into your chat. Is there anything you want to add to that, or?
I guess the one thing I'll add to that is we used to do weekly races of Wind Waker HD, and I think that helped a lot with like sticking with it even longer and like running speedrunning with other people that are also speedrunning with you. I think helps a lot and motivate it motivates me a lot more because I can also see what strats they're doing. We can learn from each other and like talking about the game too. I think helps a lot. That probably is like one of the one uh disadvantage that I felt with like the ZC speedrunning because I was the only one doing the speedruns for ZC. So like especially speedrunning Echoes of Wisdom where there's like a number of runners, like I think that definitely helps a lot when you have other people running with you and there's kind of there's both that friendly competition and also just working together to get a speed run down.
Hmm. I don't know if this video is going to be up in time to promote this, but we do have a community Wind Waker glitchless race coming up in December. Um, I think that's
Yes, we do.
on I can't remember what date it was. The
I can't
14th?
remember either.
14th? It's like a Saturday. I don't know if this video will be up by then.
Yeah, that sounds
But if
right.
it is, there's going to be it sounds like there's going to be a lot of us. We do that just about every year. And definitely, I think for anyone who wants to get into speedrunning, having yeah, people to run alongside with doing races can help with motivation. And segueing right from that, if um, you wanted to give any advice to somebody who was interested in speedrunning, but they didn't know where to start, and maybe they felt intimidated by the difficulty, what would be the one most important thing you'd say to them?
I would say definitely speedrun something that you would you would have fun with. Like speedrun something you will have a good time doing, and also don't stress too much about getting a really good time or like getting world record or having a good time on the leaderboard. Because like really, especially early on, leaderboard it doesn't matter. Like early on, and maybe even in general, like speedrun how you want to speedrun. I mean, leaderboard stuff is nice and all, but especially earlier on, like pace yourself to pace yourself how you want to pace yourself getting into a speed run. Like you can do like really like much easier strats and maybe build up over time. Like that's kind of what I did with SM64. Like I did a lot of just really easy strats. I didn't do a lot of really fast things at all, and I just kind of slowly just added things here and there, and that kind of helped gradually like get me a little bit more into the speed run. And I think I can give the same advice to people like looking to get into speed running. Just like, take it at a pace that will work best for you. Add things in as you go, and as you get better and maybe more confident with the run, and yeah, just have fun with it and enjoy the process. You
Enjoy
never
the
know where
ride.
it'll take you. Enjoy the ride.
Fair enough. Well, we've covered speedrunning, we've covered game dev, we've talked about your community and some of your other hobbies here. And we're coming up to the end of our time here. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't really touched on? Anything you want to add to the stuff you said that you didn't before? Or any final
Um,
thoughts?
I've I think I've covered about everything I could say. I know I definitely went a little longer than I expected on some of the questions, but but yeah, I mean, I've been like I said, I've been doing this for about 6 years now, which again, like when I started, I had no idea I was going to last even that long. But like it's been a fun journey. It's been really good meeting people through this and just all the things I've gotten to do with it. And yeah, it's been fun. Been fun. I'm very glad I got into it. I'm very glad I went to Best Buy and bought a capture card and hit start streaming. And the rest is history.
The rest is history. Well, on that note, thank you, Joash, for helping us with this interview for Dungeon Runners. We really
Thank you for
appreciate
having me
it.
on.
And yeah, for those of you watching at home, go follow Joash on Twitch, follow him on YouTube. Go play some of his games. Go play Slipstream. You're gonna have a great time. Um, and with that said, we are gonna sign off here, and we will see you guys on the next Dungeon Runners interview.